G'day guys, so it's 20 here and welcome back to Marble Mountain. In today's episode, I'm going to be working on the mountain side of Montana. This is the capital city of Marble Mountain, and I have been working on Montana for probably about 13 episodes or so, and just solely focusing on developing up the city to a standards that I would consider to be fairly complete, but still a lot of room for growth. And I basically just wanted Montana to look like a city before moving on to other parts of Marble Mountain, because this series, as you all know, is really more about how connected a whole province or state is, rather than focusing on just building a city. So I actually think we're at that stage. I think that Montana really holds for itself. It is very much a completed city, but there is still so much more I want to do on it, and I am going to move on to other places within Marble Mountain starting in the next episode. So this is the last episode in Montana for a little while we start working on some other places, and we'll be back for sure, because, you know, in the whole scheme of things, we're probably scratching the surface of Montana. There's still heaps more to go, but man, I am so keen to get out into some of the other regions of Marble Mountain. And I'll go through more of that later in the video. I'm actually only going to do probably about 10 minutes of time-lapse, and then the rest of it's going to be live play, where I show you other places where I want to work on in future episodes. But for the time being, we are focusing on this hillside, and my idea for this hillside is that this is pretty much the outskirts of the city. So we are looking at suburbs that are a little bit more sprawling. There is also a lot more nature around this side as well. So you'll also see me plop down a lot of parks and a lot of national parks as well. So yeah, a little less urban and a little bit more into the, into the foresty side of the mountain side. And I think I mentioned in the last episode, but I really like working in these sort of locations. I think the interaction with the natural landscape and the city is really an interesting part about cities, and I've been pretty keen to work around here. So this is the outskirts of the city, just this little location, but we're definitely not on the outskirts of the city in many of the other places within Montana. Now, before I start talking too much about what I am doing right now in the build, a couple of quick things. First up, I am currently overseas at the moment, so I'm in China doing about 2 weeks traveling over there. So I'm probably gonna won't be able to interact with you guys quite as much when this video comes out. So sorry if I don't get to your questions in the comments straight away. I might be out of reception. And I'm doing a lot of pre-recording in Australia right now so that I can keep releasing content while I'm away. And secondly, by the time this video is up, I should have had a far better and more superior internet connection installed into my house. Fingers crossed about that, because if that is true and if all things go to plan, then I should be able to do live streaming by the time I get back from China, which I'm just so sick of my internet right now. It doesn't even feel like it is a possibility that I could even have better internet. However, you know, we're getting installed basically the best type of internet in Australia, which honestly is not anything that decent compared to other places around the world. I'm probably actually going to have far better internet connection in China traveling around than I do in my own house in Australia. So hopefully all that goes to plan. I'm going to do some practice live streams with my patrons just to make sure that I get everything up to standard and have everything super smooth and nice before I start streaming to the public. But fingers crossed, I really want to start live streaming, and I really want to start live streaming in Marble Mountain because we actually have a really nice frame rate and I can fly around the whole city and region pretty smoothly. I know the last episode was pretty rough, but I was really cranking up the graphics pretty hard during that episode. Generally, my frame rate in Marble Mountain and in Montana, in the heart of the city, is actually pretty decent. So I think that gives a lot of really great opportunities to stream in this series, and also work on like some really amazing things like train connections into the greater region, and figuring out the best routes for industry and for tourism. There's so many great possibilities with this series, and I am super excited to start streaming. So fingers crossed. I will let you know on Twitter, and I'll keep you guys updated. I won't be dropping off completely when I go to China. I plan to do quite a lot still over there, and I am super far ahead in a lot of my series at the moment, just because I am going overseas and I do want to continue content just as much as I am anyway. And I also have some quite ambitious projects coming up too that I don't want to give too much away on, but basically I do need to get pretty far ahead in my series so I can start working on some new stuff. I know I'm always starting projects, but you know, I think new is always better, and I'm always inspired to do new things. Alright, I think that's it on my list, which is great, because now I can start talking about everything that I've been doing. By the way, I'm going to be able to give a much better description of what I'm doing when I'm in the live play as well. So I have been working on the neighborhoods that sprawl around this hillside, and like I said, these houses are they've got a lot more space between them than they do in the heart of the city or even in the suburbs. And I also wanted there to be a real mix of the types of houses that I was choosing. So other suburbs that I've created, I've chosen probably about 4 houses on rotation and just use those ones in different locations. And this area, it's probably the more diverse types of houses that I use, because I wanted it to look like there were obviously the original types of houses, so the more older style houses that were around here. But then because this is a location that probably has some of the better views in the city, I also wanted there to be some of the bigger types of houses, but I also wanted them to look a little bit newer than, like a real contrast between the two types of families that live around here. And it's also not, might have some really nice views around here, but it's also probably not the greatest area. There are quite a lot of industry around this area, and there's also a very busy main road. I figured that this neighborhood would probably attract both wealthy residents and also residents who have probably just been living in houses around this area for generations. So I wanted there to be just a real mix of older style houses and then the more wealthier, larger style houses too. So I wouldn't call this area like the Beverly Hills of Montana. We're actually going to work on a region like that way down the track, and I think the area that I have in mind for that. But this area in particular is more just based on a general sort of neighborhood that is on the outskirts of the city. Just so happens to have some pretty decent views. And now I'm working on another little neighborhood that is situated up in the ridge of this mountainside. I love this little area down here, so I actually wanted it to really feel like its own little community. It's obviously still connected to Montana. It's definitely not a separate town from Montana, but people who live around here, they've got their own shops, and it's probably was once its own little town away from the city, but now as the city has really started to sprawl, it is way more connected than it has ever been. It's still kind of close, but in the whole scheme of this map and how everything is connected, I would consider this to be quite far away from the heart of the downtown. So, obviously the light rail system isn't going to make it all the way up here, and there will be a bus route when we start working out that one. But building this thing, I was trying to figure out where neighborhoods generally creep up when they meet a hillside or a mountainside quite like this one, and generally neighborhoods will go up in the ridge of a mountain, so very rarely will like a neighborhood be built on top of a mountain or on like the hilliest or the highest areas of the mountain, and for good reason. It's quite windy and probably less vegetation. It's probably generally the more harder location to build in, whereas these ridges, these valleys, they're usually better locations for neighborhoods and houses. That doesn't mean that houses don't creep up on mountainsides, because they definitely do, and that's what I try to incorporate as well. But I was trying to figure out where the main roads were going to be traveling up, and generally up in the, you know, ridges of the mountains. So this road that's going up will be probably more of a highway as it leaves this neighborhood, and there will be a couple of little neighborhoods, and there will be like scattered houses around here. But as it gets further up into the mountainside, it's going to pretty much become a desolate highway that is, you know, very distant from the city. And I am just so excited to start working on areas like that. You know, there's a whole reason why I've started this series, is because I was just so keen to build in locations that were other than cities and really see how everything just gets connected through roads and rail. And yeah, oh man, it's gonna get so good, this series, especially now that we're getting out of the city. And now that we are getting out of the city, I can start working on some more national parks, which Montana and Marble Mountain doesn't really have at the moment. So quite a lot of this area around here, these hillsides, are going to have a lot of these trails, and I'm going to dedicate these trails for, most of them are going to be national parks, and some of them will just have trails, you know, wandering off where people have just been hiking. But I'll talk more about that in the live play, which I'm going to get into right now. This is one of those builds that completely transforms the city, and what I mean by that is I feel like I didn't really do that much. You know, I was really only plopping down suburbs and houses and parks, but it has just changed the way the city looks so much. And I think the reason why is it's just made it look a lot more realistic. So, I mean, two examples, I guess. There is this area over here and this area over here, which you can tell I'm still building and it's still under construction, and it looks quite unrealistic just having the city stop like this at a main road. Whereas we are now going into the mountainside, and this is how cities tend to interact with mountains. And as you can imagine, as we work more around this area in Montana, there's going to be more suburbs that, you know, creep around these mountainous areas and interacting with the landscape like cities do. And I think in the last episode I mentioned that that's my favorite type of city building. This is the outskirts of the city, and I'm getting pretty keen to move on to those places, which, to be honest, I'm not going to do in the next episode. I'm going to talk about the next episode in a little bit because there's a lot to talk about. First, I'm going to show you some of the things that I've been building. I'm going to start with the suburbs that we have. So we have 3 suburbs in this area. We have Underhill Park, Chester Hill, which I built a couple of episodes ago, and then we got Briarwood Heights. I'm going to get my patrons to change those names because they're kind of average. And we have Holy Nature Reserve, which is another pretty average name for a national park. Linden City Park, I don't really mind that name. I think it's kind of cool. Alright, where am I going to start? Alright, doing a live play. I need to stop just looking at the creation and start talking about what I'm doing. So, we are still pretty close to the city, and I would think that these guys have got a pretty decent spot in the city. Like, this is like a great place to live, in terms of location. But, like, however, just because you're close to the downtown doesn't mean it's a nice place to live. This is the train line for cargo, so it's going to be really noisy. This highway is super noisy. We've got this big factory here and all these office blocks and factories that are going to be sitting around here at some stage. So this area isn't actually a nice area, even though it has probably some of the nicest views in Montana. It's really probably not a very nice area. So it's a real mix of houses, because I'd imagine it's starting to get a bit maybe more gentrified. So we've got these sort of houses, which are obviously much nicer houses, and then we've got some of the more smaller ones, which are a bit more on the dingy side of things. Plus, you are pretty close to Chester Hill, which is, as we all know, not a very nice neighborhood. So it's a real mix around here, and I'm talking about this particular area. And this area here, I don't think would be a very nice area to live. Frame rate's not too bad, to be honest. I'm still cranking up the detail a little bit with my settings. I am trying to be a bit conscious of that, so I have unsubbed from a few mods just for my live play videos. That's why it's probably not quite as detailed as when I'm doing the cinematics and stuff like that. So this is Linden Park. It's a really unusual park because it is just built into this mountainside, so only some areas are flat where obviously the playing fields are, and then we just got some walking trails around here. Yeah, I went for super limited detail work. I mean, the most detailed houses are these ones here with the fences, but I really didn't do too much on them. But it just creates some great angles when looking around like this. Alright, what else can I show? So we have this walking trail, which we're going to have a lot more of them going all the way up these mountains where there's pretty much no houses. And this place around here, I would consider not... okay, maybe not. I think that this is probably the last bunch of houses in Montana. And then anything past here is technically not within the city anymore. So what I plan to do with this road is I plan to have a couple of small houses around here on some bigger plots of land. And then maybe some services, like maybe, I don't know, I want to say stadium, but not a stadium here. Some other things like that around here. And then this road's going to be the main road that leads into this area around here, into the mountainside. And then around here, we're eventually going to have some sort of town that is going to be quite small. It's going to sit on this river, which is obviously very under detailed at the moment, but I plan to have this at the foothill, maybe somewhere around here where this waterfall is. And I'd imagine that this would be some sort of tourist, vacation area that people from the city probably, go to for a bit of a retreat. So that's the plan for up there. This mountain, by the way, is going to have quite a few different little suburby areas, but I'm going to keep it pretty small because I don't want it to, I don't want like another big town up here, a big city, because I think it'll take away from what Montana is. So that's the plan for around there. And then up here we're going to have some wealthier neighborhoods around here, so some really big mansions, and I'm going to be placing down a lot of greenery, so it's going to be quite nice around here. Maybe even some kind of golf course. Around here is going to be a lot of industry, and that's where probably the power plant's going to sit, and the tip and recycling center and some more big factory kind of things. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to do around here. I'm sort of thinking more suburbs going into, I guess, nature. Man, there's so many places to build. We are only just scratching the surface of this series. Alright, next episode. The plan is to get out of the city. I'm really happy with how Montana's looking at the moment, and I'm pretty keen to get out and start working on some of the other areas. So we have been focusing on the city, getting up the population, because we have had a massive demand for residential. However, that residential demand has now decreased to the point where we now are actually kind of needing some industry, which gives me a pretty good excuse to start plopping down some farms and start working in some other regions, which I think the first couple of farms should probably be around here. So that's the plan for the next episodes, probably for maybe like 5 or so episodes as we creep into the general other region of Marble Mountain. So that's the plan, and I'm super keen for it. And I am so keen for it that I think I'm gonna stop recording now and start building some of the things straight away. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to leave some nice feedback by leaving a like below this video, or leaving some comments in the comments section. Also helps me out a whole ton too. If you haven't subscribed already, then maybe go and do that so you can get some more updates with Marble Mountain as we continue working on this series. But until next time, guys, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you later.